Hello and welcome to another edition of our Veterans Corner. I'm Marshal Preston, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel retired, and your host for today's segment. Veterans Corner is an initiative of your Westborough Veterans Advisory Board and graciously produced by our partners here at Westborough Television. The goal of Veterans Corner is to share information on topical issues that may affect our veterans, their families, residents, and friends within our community. It's also an opportunity to spotlight local veterans where we seek to share some of their experiences and stories to highlight their service and continued civic contributions to the community at large. And by doing so, we hope to educate the community of the variety and breadth of experiences that veterans have, and perhaps break down some of the assumptions, biases, or stereotypes that we may hold on to, consciously or unconsciously. So to that end, today we are quite fortunate to have John Gallinagh with us, and I'm looking forward to the conversation ahead. John, thank you again for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I know you've been deeply involved in veterans activities for many, many years around the Westborough community. But if you don't mind, take us back to how you came to service, where you were, well, let's start earlier, where you were born and raised,
okay,
and et cetera.
Okay. My parents are Irish. They emigrated to England, where I was born. Then I was brought back to Ireland as a baby, and between World War II, we moved back and forth between England and Ireland, and we lived in the largest industrial city in England, Birmingham, and we were bombed every night by the Germans. And funny story, if I could just add, because I'm so proud of my mother, we would go to bed fully dressed. Our shoes were at the bottom of the bed. My brother Michael and my sister Rosemary downstairs, and she would come up in the middle of the night and say, "Time to get up, the Germans are coming," as though they were coming for dinner or something like that. But I think she really preserved our sanity, if you will, being bombed every night and what have you, and spending the night in the bomb shelters and what have you.
Yeah, just a cool, calm,
Yep.
While it must be nerve-wracking, but...
Yep, she was just absolutely wonderful, and my brother Michael did suffer from nightmares from that experience, but he got over it much later in life. So we spent most of my time, I moved back and forth between England and Ireland. And when in Ireland, I couldn't speak English, I had to speak Gaelic. That was kind of a curveball with the English language, because then I'd always be a year behind and miss out and what have you. So the economy in England was very bad after the war, and there was a lot of discrimination against the Irish. So my father and my uncle-in-law, the O'Briens from Dublin, we decided to emigrate to Canada. I was 15 when I left England to Canada, and I spent 5 years in Canada before ending up here in the United States. I emigrated first on my own when I was 17, and my father raised hell, wanted me to come back, keep the family together, so I came back. Then I immigrated again when I was 19. I said, well, I'm staying here. And I was put up with my aunts who emigrated in the 1930s.
Okay.
In Canada, I primarily worked for the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce for a couple of years, and also the Toronto Transit Commission. And down here, when I came to New York, I went to work for a local bank and spent about 14 years with that bank, which eventually became Bank of New York. There were a lot of consolidations in the 60s and the 70s and what have you. And so I spent most of my working career in banking. And the largest bank that I had to manage was about $1 billion bank with 25 branches and print agency and stuff like that. So that was, for me, was a lot of fun. And what I learned during my experience is that you have to learn, to be successful, you have to be able to manage change.
True.
And so I was able to survive all the mergers and what have you. So I had an opportunity to come to Massachusetts in 1975 and got a job with a bank up here and ended up working up here in banking for about maybe 10 years. And then I struck out as a consultant. And I specialized in working for financial institutions that were in trouble with the regulators. And so I had a couple of options. I either had to find a partner to merge them or get new management, new board, and try to reestablish them, what have you. So I did that for about, roughly about 10 years. So I worked until I was 80, which I loved doing that. And then bringing you somewhat up to date, I was on the Veterans Advisory Board for about 5 years. And in that time, in the initial stages, I was assisting Ken Ferrara, who was the Veteran Service agent. And I was kind of his shadow backup. And then when he decided to retire, then I took on his role for about 5 years, serving veterans in the 4 towns, Westborough, Northborough, Shrewsbury, and Grafton. And I left that, as I said, after about 5 years.
Okay. And that was the role at which I got the good fortune of crossing paths and
Yeah.
getting to meet you. So, okay. Well, take us back. When did you put on the uniform?
Well, I came down, I was 19, and I think it was about 20, and the War in Vietnam was just starting out. And my father, his position was, if you're living in a country and you're earning a living, et cetera, then you need to be prepared to fight for the country. So I volunteered to join the Navy in the early 1961, and spent 3 months in boot camp. There was a big backlog, I presume, because of the buildup to the war in Vietnam, and got shore duty at the naval station at Newport, Rhode Island, which was back then was the big destroyer base. And my orders came after about maybe 5 months to report to the USS Essex, which was being converted from an attack carrier to anti-submarine warfare. And so I spent about 2 deployments. One, we had went down for a shakedown cruise and pulled into Guantanamo, and they were waiting to go ashore for liberty and what have you. And the ship got underway. Nobody knew what was going on. Turns out, looking back, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Uh-huh. So the first couple of days, we were cruising off the Cuban coast, just firing 5-inch weapons, not trying to hit anything, but just to let the Russians know that we were there. And then we were relieved by the USS Enterprise, which was the first nuclear carrier. And then we resumed our mission, which was anti-submarine warfare. So our mission was to locate 3 Russian subs that were carrying nuclear weapons. They wanted to make Cuba a nuclear state. And so our role was to locate them, find them, what have you. And one of our sister ships, choppers, found them, I believe, off the Azores, and they were on the surface. And so basically, I think that ended the conflict, but it was all top secret. I was just an enlisted guy, so I didn't really have a full picture of what was going on. And then we just resumed. Our next mission then was to prevent any ships going into Cuban ports with any kind of military gear and what have you. So we spent about 5 months going back and forth and stopping ships and all that. We had a boarding party that would go across and board the ships and search them before they could let them go through. My job on the carrier was I was what they call a disbursement clerk. So I was handling the payroll, the benefits for the crew. So on board the ship, my customers were the Marine unit, the pilots, and the ship's company officers.
Okay.
And back then in the 60s, before your time, there was no debit card, no laptop, so we had to carry cash. So we carried about $1 million in cash and to pay the crew. And during, we were refueling at sea once, and a destroyer was replenishing alongside us, and they sent the word, "We don't have any money for the crew. Can you send somebody to them?" So I was highline from the carrier to the supply ship, then highline from the supply ship to the destroyer. So I'm in the galley, I'm paying these guys so they can buy, gum and whatever they wanted. And she went to battle stations, so she just peeled off and kind of like in the movies and what have you. And back then, for me, I thought it was fun. Of course, being young, you feel you're invincible.
Yes.
And you're in the best Navy in the world.
Yep.
So I enjoy my time. So just 2 deployments. The second deployment was simply stopping ships, going into Cuba, searching them, and make sure that they didn't carry any military gear or what have you.
It's fantastic. Okay.
So
Quickly for the audience, explain highlining.
highlining is, well, you put it in a basket.
Yep.
And had a bag of cash and a .45, and they just fire a line over, and then they just sort of do this, and you're going like this, you're going up and down as the ships are going forward. They're not standing still, they're going forward. And then finally you land on the other side, and you go through the same thing with the destroyer.
Yep.
And then same thing on reverse. So for me, it was a fun experience. I enjoyed it.
Yep. One person across at a time?
I was the only one that went across.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, good.
The only one with the money, so.
All right. U.S. Navy tattoo,
Yes.
looks like.
Yep, got that in Norfolk before we shipped out. We'd sailed down from, we were 2 carrier groups that were stationed at Quonset Point, and our mission was primarily to patrol the North Atlantic down to the Caribbean. So we would go back and forth on these missions. Sister ship was the USS Essex. So we would come back, they would go down, and they would come back, we would go down.
Okay.
And spend roughly about 5 to 6 months on each deployment, if you will.
Any foreign ports that stick out in your mind?
No, just Cuba.
Yep. All right.
No, because of the times and the mission, we really, there was no time for liberty, so we did not have any port calls other than one time we pulled back into Guantanamo, and I was able to go ashore in Guantanamo for a short liberty.
Okay.
That was it.
I guess that's better than nothing, but I was curious if they had made it out to the Azores or
No.
even into Ireland and to the UK, but no. Okay. How long did you said about 4 years of active service?
2 years active duty.
Okay.
And then 2 years in the reserves, active reserves, and then 2 years ready reserves. So you'd be on call in case of an emergency, what have you.
Okay. And were those units tied back to the Norfolk area, Virginia?
No, it was actually, I was with a reserve unit in New Rochelle, New York.
Okay.
And basically that's where I spent my time. So I ended up getting out in 67, officially discharged in 67 with, I was a DK3, petty officer, 3rd class when I got out.
Okay. It's a pretty good time. Yeah. And prior to substantial combat operations in Vietnam, but as you had pointed out, we were.
Yeah, I was very lucky that we didn't ship out there for sure.
And at this time, the draft was still
on.
Still
yes.
on.
Yeah.
Okay. Explain to us. Did you pursue the Navy?
Yes.
And if why the Navy over the Army or the Marines?
Well, I volunteered for the Navy, just simply because going back and forth between England and Ireland, we were at sea a lot, so I really enjoyed that experience. And when we first came to this country, on our way to Canada, we sailed from Southampton to Le Havre in France, and then stopped at Cove of Cork, and then we stopped at Bermuda. We never got ashore, and then headed up to New York and got off there and took a train up to Toronto.
Okay. Pretty good. Any old sailors and friends that made a particularly strong impact?
Not really. It was a very small unit that I was attached to. So my commanding officer was the same age as me. They, at one point, they were looking for people to go to OCS, Officer Candidate School. So I applied. They had an aptitude test that they gave. I took the aptitude test. I passed it. But they found out I was not a citizen. I was a Canadian citizen, and therefore I could not become an officer.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I would have made a career out of the Navy had I been an officer, because I really loved it.
And did they give or ask you to renege your Canadian citizenship as a possibility?
No.
Okay.
No.
Would you have? It sounds like you might have considered it.
If that was required, I would have, but it was not an option back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you still Canadian citizen?
Dual. I have
and
three.
Irish as well.
Irish,
Canadian and U.S.
Canadian, U.S. Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
That's pretty unique and
Yep.
well done. Okay. Any young sailors that you mentored along the way, or
Not really. Probably I was mentored by the chief petty officer, who really, they really run the show, and he really provided a lot of backup and training and guidance and what have you. And I learned a lot from being in the military in terms of being responsible, taking my job seriously, because if you don't, then others could get hurt, perhaps. And so just a small unit, and sailors would come and go, rotate on and off the ship, what have you.
No, following up on that, it occurs to me, and I've thought about this in talking with MBA students and others, is this built-in fabric of trust and assumption that I have a role and duty to play, and others cannot be successful in their duties if I don't do mine very well.
Right. I mean, basically in the military, and I think it's true in real life, to be responsible and backing up whomever you're working with or whomever you're working for.
Yep.
I think that was one of the many lessons that I learned.
And then being able to communicate, we're off and need help,
Yeah.
or and clearly the largest difference between civilian and military operations is sort of the consequences of what could occur.
Right.
Based on.
Yeah. I forgot to mention on board the carrier, my battle station was I was assigned to a firefighting team, and so we would drill, pretty much, the ship operated 24/7, and they would drill, they would sound the alarm in the middle of the night, to sort of wake up and run to the hangar bay. And my job was, because I was not a qualified firefighter, my job, I was the guy that held the front of the hose, and my job was to push it into the bomb bay so they could spray the bombs with foam and what have you. But thank God, nothing ever happened. But that was an interesting experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
you never want to be late.
nope. And about as crucial and critical as it comes.
Yep.
And kind of the worst nightmare that you could experience on a ship.
Right.
So yeah, well worth practicing. Okay. So as you shared, you left the Navy, you returned to the finance world,
Yes.
quite successful in New York, and then finally back up in Massachusetts.
Correct.
And you'd shared that through Ken into the VSO, but how did you find that connection or return to sort of the veterans? You may never have left it, but to sort of an active leadership role within it.
You mean when I took over the VSO? Well, basically the the position, we were supposed to have a full-time veteran service agent, and during Ken and my experience, there was a lot of turnover. There was really not consistency, so we had to step up and kind of fill the gap above and beyond what normally we would have done. It was a job where you only got online training. You had to learn the systems and what have you to take care of any needs that veterans might have vis-a-vis the VA healthcare system, what have you. And then in addition to that, the VSO in Massachusetts handles Chapter 115 clients, which are low-income veterans and or their spouses. So there was a special Massachusetts program that's unique to the country, actually, to serve those veterans that are at the low-income level.
Okay.
In the 4 towns. We had to take care of them in the 4 towns.
Well, if you could share with us a little bit of the common, what you just did a little bit on what are some of the common challenges that the veteran community, rely on the VA and their families?
Well, I think one, at least speaking from my own experience, when I got out of the Navy, they try to keep you in the Navy, and they said, once you go into civilian life, you're not going to be protected. We can take care of you. So basically, it was only years later that I learned that I was eligible to become a member of the VA healthcare system. And when I became the VSO, that came true so many, many times that a lot of veterans just did not know what benefits were available to them through the VA healthcare system, which is really, from my own personal experience, it's really a great program and has helped me personally and with some of my issues and what have you. And so helping, the primary mission was to help veterans get on the system. There was an application process that you had to go through. Since George Bush won, they now have an income test level, which is, I think, kind of unfortunate that they can be ruled out if they have too much money in retirement or what have you. I found it really, I was really passionate about it because I felt that these guys were coming in, and some of them were, and women, we had both veterans coming in, that some of them were, had gone through really bad experience. I was very, very fortunate in my experience at the Navy. Had a warm bed, warm meals, etc. But troops on the front line, that was not the case.
Right.
And so many of them would come back with different issues of one kind or another. I was going to an acupuncture for treatment, and her son was in the Marine Corps, young kid. He was a machine gunner, served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And as he was getting ready to get out of the service, he complained to his mother that he was deaf in his ears. And so I said, well, that's what we're here for. We're here to help him. And he refused help. And just felt that, I'm taking it away from somebody else. That's a common theme that some of the veterans have, that they feel that if they get the service that they need and they've earned, they're taking it away from somebody else, which is not the case. The VA was set up to serve all veterans, male, female, etc. And so that was a challenge to overcome the reluctance. They would come in and look for help, and they thought, oh, well, I don't want any handouts, things of that sort.
Now, even within my own personal, my wife was active duty for 6 years, and when she separated, she joined the reserves for a little bit. But that separation process was slightly quick based on our 2 assignments. And at the time, she didn't feel as if she had the time to complete the full veterans claims,
Yep.
to at least to have somebody analyze whether or not she qualified for benefits or not. And I think she also justified it from I haven't deployed, I haven't been in combat,
Yeah.
pretty young, pretty healthy.
Yeah.
And I think the counter is in also a little bit of, so I don't feel as if I've earned it, and there are others out there who clearly have.
Right. Right.
And I agree with you that the challenge, not the challenge, but the response is a little bit of, give it to the VA, let
Right,
them take a
exactly,
look.
exactly.
You might be right,
Right.
but there likely are a couple things that you've been exposed to or been asked to do along
Right.
the way that
Yeah.
you may not understand. You will have a ripple.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, I mean, one of the most common things was Agent Orange, of course, during Vietnam. And a lot of sailors didn't realize if they served on the ships in country that they were exposed to it. And, 40, 50 years later, they come down with cancer, respiratory issues, what have you. The burn pits are the same thing. My son served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and, he was exposed to the burn pits. And he's one of those guys that feels, no, I'm not going to apply for any benefits, which I felt he was foolish because 40 years from now he could need that help. In addition to getting people enrolled in the VA, some of them would apply and would be turned down for service-connected disabilities, what have you. So I would help them navigate to get approved or to get reapproved for
appealed and
appealed, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So that happened, fairly regularly. It depends, I think, on whose desk the claim falls on, and sometimes it could be turned down for, when you actually read it, for really not a good reason. So I was very fortunate to be able to help a number of veterans win their appeals and get what I felt they had deserved and earned based on their service.
And then I also know that there are families and burial benefits that come with it as well. So
Yes.
helping families navigate through,
Right.
And some didn't even know, and some sort of know that there's something there, but to what level? And I think that's a wonderful benefit that the service has earned and gives out. Well, good. Talk quickly a little bit about your participation in other veteran service organizations.
Yeah, well, I'm currently the quartermaster for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and in that capacity, I'm working on projects for the local post, which experienced a fire. So I'm working with contractors to get a price of what it would cost to rebuild the interior of the building, and so I handle any billings that come in for the VFW post. Most of it I'm able to do it online, and I'm also the adjutant for the American Legion. The American Legion, the local post was dormant for about 11 years. And Paul Harrigan, the commander, and we decided to see if we could kickstart the organization, and thank goodness we could and did. We have about 49 paying members, and of the paying members, we have maybe 15, 20 members show up for monthly meetings. We hold those meetings currently at the Senior Center on the third Thursday of the month at 10 o'clock. We do alternate some evening meetings and weekend meetings to see if we can attract younger veterans who may be working and have a family and commitments like that.
As a working member, I appreciate that flexibility.
Yeah.
And to the rest of the larger community, while you may not be a member, I'm confident that I can speak that come on out, take a look, and if interested, that organization can help you find your way to membership.
And both, primarily the American Legion, the difference between the two groups, the VFW and the American Legion, one, in order to be a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, you have to have served in a conflict area. With the American Legion, you just have to have served honorably. So all veterans who have served honorably can join the American Legion, whether they're deployed or not. I'm not sure whether it's, we do sponsor a lot of activities. Some of them are in conjunction with the Veterans Advisory Board. We support the Veterans Advisory Board flags on the cemeteries, flags on the Rotary, Memorial Day and Veterans Day. And then the Legion itself sponsors semi-annually poppy drives to raise funds where we can deploy that funds to help local veterans. We also sponsor a bingo night, and we just provide support to veterans that need help. Sometimes some of our members talk to me because I was the former VSO and say, oh, how do I file a claim? Or I was turned down for this, what have you. So I'm very fortunate. I work with Jeff Farrell, who is the current full-time veteran service agent. And so he's able to sort of step in and take charge of that particular situation.
Yep, connecting the right resources.
Yeah.
And I know not only do they do that, but there's generally a food drive,
Yes.
Socks and clothing drive to get
Correct.
to our homeless or in need community, and then there's the outreach
Correct.
throughout the year.
Right.
I know Legion's got be the one to try and knock,
Right.
Be a resource to help the nation knock at the veteran suicide challenge.
Yeah, we do. We've tried multiple times. The Legion has tried multiple times to do buddy checks, where you're checking up on people. You're calling them, sending them an email. Are you all right? Do you need help, assistance, what have you? And as you probably know from your experience, that the country's going through this food insecurity situation, and it's particularly hard for older veterans who are on a fixed income, don't have much in the way of retirement other than Social Security. And so we try to, again, in conjunction with the Veterans Advisory Board, provide food baskets around Thanksgiving and Christmas to try to help them out. And again, when we call on them, many of them say, well, I don't need help. They have this pride of that they're taking it away from somebody else, which is...
Pay it forward to somebody that needs it more.
Yes, exactly.
But don't diminish your own need.
Exactly.
No. Well, John, it's clear that you are service-oriented. You've given so much of yourself to the community, to the rest of the veterans community. You've certainly made a positive impact on me, and I know the board, so many thanks for that. I think that's why the board had voted you as Veteran of the Year a couple years ago, and I think we're excited to you continue to serve in leadership roles, and looking forward to see where it all goes.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I really enjoyed meeting with you today.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Out to the rest of the community, as we wrap up, I'd like to remind our audience that our Veteran Service Officer, Jeff Farrell, maintains an office in the first floor of Town Hall, and his contact information can be seen on the screen at the end of today's show. Both he and the Veterans Advisory Board are here to help guide you to the resources and benefits that your uniformed service may have earned. As John had suggested, we've got some flags coming up for the 4th of July, and then flags will come down from the veterans' cemeteries in November around Veterans Day. Lastly, I'd like to thank our friends at Westborough TV for their continued support in putting this Veterans Corner together. And of course, a big thank you once again to guest John Gallinagh for coming out and sharing his story. Till next time, thank you for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful week and a beautiful 4th of July ahead. Thank you.